we operate from a default of distrust, right? So we don't trust initially. In fact, we're like, you're guilty until proven innocent. Okay, well, why is it that our law is you're innocent until proven guilty? But we want to walk in with this, I'm going to assume the worst in you.
Welcome back to the Culture Based Podcast. You know, we've been doing the every other week thing now, and it makes me, absence makes the heart fonder. I just love it so much more when we do get together for these episodes. I'm Dustin. He's Blake. We are the Culture Based. We're so glad that you're here. And I hope you've been missing us as much as we've been missing you. So we're going to get into today's episode about building a culture of accountability without micromanagement, the big M word, here in a little bit. But first, I want to remind you that we're here to help leaders. What's that?
It's micromanagement.
Micromanagement. That's true. That is the correct.
You remember the Office episode? It's cool. That's cool.
I do. I remember. It's hard when you don't have a live in studio.
Micro audience. Style of management. What do you call that, Jim? Micromanagement? Micromanagement. Yeah, that's it.
I love it. We're not here to micromanagement. We're here to microage.
It's perfect. That was great.
Sure. Well, we're here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get them there. We're going to talk about how we do that here in just a few moments. But before we get into that, I want to encourage you to subscribe on all audio podcast platforms or wherever you may be listening to this. If you're watching on YouTube, we're so glad that you're here. Get to see our silliness in action. You can hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the bell. It's a like, subscribe, ring the bell. That way you're notified every time new content drops, just like this. Episodes every other week, but we do have some great reels or shorts, whatever YouTube calls them these days, busting out regularly as well. Let's see. Follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all those places at The Culture Base, BASE. And also head on over to theculturebase.com/strategy to book a free 30-minute strategy session with us. Who doesn't love free stuff? And we're going to be there for you to talk through whatever issue is facing your organizational culture, walk you through that in the way that we do. Also pick up our free resource while you're there, or we have multiple free resources on our website. Go to theculturebase.com/resources. We have things like the best interview questions ever PDF guide and our ebook, The Scalability Playbook. Also, there's a link to pick up Blake Bear's book, Uncultured. All right, I think that's all the promo stuff. I wanted to quickly, before we get into some updates on culture-based stuff, I just have to use this because I have to use any platform necessary when you're married. And if you're married, you understand why I have to do what I'm about to do. But when this podcast releases is our 19th wedding anniversary. So I have to say my biggest accomplishment in the world is marrying my wife. 19 years, not quite 20. So we're getting closer and closer to legal. 1 year we'll make it legal. That's a joke about being 21. We're actually are legally married. Anyway,
that's awesome.
The value of the YouTube subscription is Blake's facial expressions and reactions to when I say dumb stuff. That's why you want to be on YouTube. But yeah, I had to throw that in there. If you're married, you understand why. I wanted to riff just for a few moments here at the beginning, Blake, just kind of an update on what's been happening in the culture base. We're doing fewer episodes now. We're doing every other week instead of every week. And so I thought it'd be a good time to just kind of share, hey, what's going on with the culture base? Where we at? What we've been up to? What you got for us?
Yeah, so we are, I think one area that we'll be hitting on here in a couple weeks, or maybe next month is probably a better way to say it.
In a couple episodes.
Be hitting next month. Yeah, a couple episodes. Is this idea of a player. And we reference it, we talk about it often, but there are certain categorical aspects that make someone an A player or not an A player. And there is no perfect way to give people, I don't even know the right word, ratings, like how would you categorize them? We can do it intuitively in our gut, and that's okay, but we're not always right. And it tends to be subjective with emotional backing and all these other
we don't want to do the
outside.
Robert California way.
Yeah. Put the one side of the list and the other side of the list, right? But there is a way to know, like, was Jordan an A player? Yeah, he was an A player. Why? When are we going to start diving in and understanding what makes A players instead of spending so much time on how do we manage C players? That's not fun. That's good. Okay. One of those is really enjoyable, and one of those just makes you want to pull teeth. Okay. So A player is something we've dove deeply into in multiple organizations, and we're starting to do some other development, even developing app and doing all these other types of things that they haven't hit the market yet. This is all brand new. But this idea of being able to give very subjective perspectives, more objectivity, and to start to use even, outside tools to help benefit this better. I don't really know how much deeper to go there, except
no, you're good. You're
when
good.
you do know your A players, and you can start having, as a visionary, you can start having goals. This year we want to be 70% A player, 25% B player, and 5% C players, because we then create action to every one of those things. How do we make B players A players? How do we help feed A players more of what they're asking for? And how do we help C players grow or go? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, we want both of those are important, and not go before grow, but how can we help them grow and make sure they're a good fit, or they need to go if they're not a good fit. And today we're going to probably talk more about that in this episode, actually. Because one of the biggest dangers is keeping C players, and C players will stay. Yeah. That's the scary part.
Yeah, for sure. And I think something you said there too is kind of hits to the heart of what we're doing here, is to help identify who the A players are. Like, you can't really kind of grow on or build upon anything without knowing your baseline, right? And so one of the things we've been doing is helping these organizations understand their baseline of where they're at with A players, and helping them define what is an A player. Means something completely different in every organization. So what does an A player mean in your organization? We've been helping them define that so that they can know what they're about, then they can show where they're going, and then they can develop a scalable team to get them there. One thing I wanted to say too, Blake, that has been super exciting. We've been doing a lot of what we've been calling excavation work with our clients at the Culture Base. And we've been really kind of digging up the ground of their organizations and kind of restructuring the entire foundation. Now, we're not saying we kicked everybody out and we brought in all new people. That's not what we're saying. We're talking more specifically about their systems and their processes, because I think what makes the Culture Base unique, Blake, is that different from other culture agencies. Other culture agencies will come in and say, okay, you need to reemphasize your values more. And that's true. You need to be able to create a fun environment to work in. And that's true. You need to be able to create a safe space to work in. And that's true. And we talk about all those things, but building that, Blake, on a foundation that's extremely unstable is not sustainable. It's not scalable. Because as you continue to grow higher and higher on a structure that at the base of it is super weak, it eventually is going to collapse. And when it collapses, it's going to be really, really catastrophic. Right. And so what we've been working on at the Culture Base is really kind of getting to the core of some of these processes and systems, because we talk about clarity in these organizations affecting the culture. Well, a lot of clarity is centered around, I don't understand what's expected of me. There's no same way that we produce this every time. So we're getting results all over the map. There's no system and process to how we're doing what we're doing. And so because of that, it breeds distrust, which again, we're going to talk about in this episode. And if nothing will kill a culture faster, I think, than distrust. And so if you're breeding that at the foundation level, then as you scale it, it's just going to magnify that distrust even more and more. So there's no amount of ping pong tables or culture values on the wall that can fix that. And so we're taking the time to create the proper infrastructure so that as we do the culture values on the walls and the ping pong tables and the field days and the bonuses and things like that, then it feels appropriate. It feels natural. It feels organic and not completely out of left field. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to get into this topic of building a culture of accountability without micromanagement. So let's get into the problem here, Blake.
It was a beautiful transition, Dustin.
I think so.
So the problem, there are a lot of problems that come up in this. The first one I think happens the first one absolutely happens in the leader's mind. And this is where I think it all lives. Like, this is our biggest problem is this. Okay. So before I even tell you that, I think you need to believe that. I had to say this in a big issue or a big quarterly yesterday. Just everyone's problems they think are real, and they're all bullshit. It's all here. It's all this. It's all the mentality and the mindset that messes us up. So I think one of the healthiest things we can do before we talk about any of these problems is believe that what I believe might not be right. Okay. And what I believe right away probably is a default mindset that I've believed for years. Okay. Stop living on the sins of your past. Stop living in the mindset of the old. And I'm not saying don't honor what has got you where you are, but that same default mindset isn't going to scale. Okay. Scale takes new challenge, new opportunity, and new mindset. Okay. Yeah. So one of the big mindsets that really causes problems here is that we believe in a binary mentality and a zero-sum mentality, that I am either high standards or I am employee engagement and autonomy, and I got to let them do their thing, or I've got to be all up on them about everything. Why does it have to be one or the other? In fact, when I think about even A players like Michael Jordan here, I think of was it Phil Knight, his coach?
Yep.
I think of the triangle offense they talk about a lot, which is high structure, but it allowed autonomy. How can that be? It can only be one or the other. Like, they had autonomy to figure out what they needed to do in the moment, but a structure that was there for them to operate within. So we don't have to have this quick binary mentality. We need to allow for this idea that there are many different options. And when you have to completely standardize and process absolutely everything, then all you're doing is trying to replicate a past you. Okay, that's not trying to replicate and create something new. You're trying to replicate you of the old. Is that really what you want to grow your organization? I hope not. Okay, so I think that's one of the big problems, is that we have this mentality, which creates huge trust deficit. Okay, and that's probably where I would go on the next one. We operate from a default of distrust, right? So we don't trust initially. In fact, we're like, you're guilty until proven innocent. Okay, well, why is it that our law is you're innocent until proven guilty? But we want to walk in with this, I'm going to assume the worst in you. Well, then you're going to get the worst of someone. That's the problem with confirmation bias. If you assume the worst in something, you're right. If you assume the best in something, you're right. Okay, so when you come into these places, that high trust deficit that can happen is, boy, it's deadly. And it makes me actually think of, what was it? Wells Fargo. You know the story of Wells Fargo. I mean, you probably know of them going through a big collapse, but one of the big issues was they were such micromanagers, like high-end micromanagers, to where they had managers on every call. Well, then why don't you have the managers do the call if they're going to be on every freaking call? So they were so tight, they came up with these, like, you've got to sell these 8 customers per quota. Like, you got to hit every one of these things. And they called it going for great Remember that? Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Tony the Tiger. Cool. So 8 products per customer. But they had such intense surveillance on this, and they were monitoring every reaction, where the team started getting innovative. Okay. Because I think innovation's in all of our blood, right? Where they started getting innovative was Wells Fargo team members created over 3 million false accounts. So they were rewarded for hitting this 8 quota, and which was almost impossible to hit. And the whole point was, let's push them past what they could possibly do, have intense surveillance, and then we'll make a lot. The cost, over $3 billion in fines.
Wow.
Okay, so it doesn't cost anything. Like, it costs a ton to have that kind of distrust. Okay, when you distrust your team so much, just don't have a team. It's better. It's less costly. I mean, the CEO had to resign. Thousands were fired. Reputation was destroyed. Nobody goes, "Ooh, Wells Fargo, what a quality." No, nobody does that, because we all know the negative connotation to it. So that rigid accountability without autonomy incentivize absolute misconduct.
Yeah.
What else would you say on the problem?
Yeah, I like our next one here because it speaks to what I was talking about, what we're doing a lot in the culture base right now, which the next problem we're going to hit on is unclear expectations. And teams can't be accountable to standards that aren't clearly defined or communicated. So how can you hold the team to a certain standard or even understand what the win is without clearly defining what the win is for your team each and every day? When they go, "Hey, I don't know what the target is, I'm just over here throwing darts and hoping I get it right," that's a big problem. So unclear expectations, which I think also plays into our next problem, which is weak feedback loops. If you don't have these regular check-ins, then how do they know that they're steering in the right direction? I often use on my one-on-ones, whether I'm reporting up or reporting down, I use the Eisenhower matrix and go, like, "Hey, this is everything that I think is on my plate right now, but let's narrow it down to what is the most urgent and important for you as my leader." Or you bring it to me and I say, "Here's what I think is the most urgent and important right now for me as your leader. Everything else can be automated, eliminated, delegated, but what we're going to focus on right now is these urgent and important items." And that comes with those feedback loops and regularly check-ins, right? And yes, it might change from here to there, but at least because you actually have that system in place. Any other problems you want to hit here, Blake?
Yeah, I think leaders, as much as they want to act tough, and we want to act tough, and we can have hard conversations, it takes energy. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. And I think what will happen a lot of times is leaders avoid those difficult conversations about performance, because sometimes we're afraid they're going to leave. Yeah. We're afraid that if I have that hard conversation, they're not going to respect us. Like, I will always go back to that mentality of, like, when you think about your favorite teacher that you ever had growing up, what are the characteristics about them? Did they not care? Did they let you get away with anything? No, that wasn't what characterized that teacher. They held you accountable. They had standards. If you showed up late, they let you know. But the difference between that and the teacher you didn't like is very small. That teacher still held you accountable, told you those things, did those things. The only difference was care. And when someone does the hard conversations with care, it's different. Yeah. It's very different. And so if you don't care, maybe you should worry about that hard conversation, because chances are you're going to get a bad result. But if you can get to a point where you say, I know by caring here, I can speak this into it. Have you built that trust up, right? Yeah. Have you built the trust in pennies so you can spend it in dimes in a hard conversation? Yeah. Like, we got to be able to have those moments. So I think that's probably the last thing I'd say about that one.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the solution of what it takes to build this culture of accountability. Like Blake just alluded to, I don't want to skip over that, because I think a lot of especially mid-level managers miss this, that trust is earned in pennies and spent and dimes. That's not an excuse to not build trust, though, because you have to start somewhere. So let's talk about like just this accountability versus micromanagement. What's the solution there? How do we balance that solution?
Yeah, it doesn't. I think when you talk about that balance, you're talking about moments, right? You're talking about historical things that happen. And if you're trying to, it's such a hard balance. Like for being patient, when are your opportunities to be patient? In times where you have to be patient, there is work that can be done in the peripheral, right? Like we can go in, we can build trust with our team. We can give them clarity in times where there isn't high stress. It's all of a sudden when high stress comes in that we will go back to default or we'll do what we said, right? And so in this instance, one of the things I think through with this micromanaging is when you say, hey, we're a really flexible team and we allow you to make mistakes. Do you? Do you let them make mistakes? Do you step in and say, hey, here's the opportunity and here's the moment for it, and did we let them? And if the answer is no, then you've got some work to do too as a leader there. And if you do, then great. But you've got to step into those places and build the trust and take those risks. Yeah,
I would say three things. Number one, going back to the Michael Jordan triangle offense, right? That there was both systems there, but there was also autonomy there, right? What they did is they didn't say, hey, when you get into that triangle, then just do exactly as I say in that moment, and I'm going to kind of like PlayStation control this thing to perfection.
Yeah.
Right. They said, no. I'm going to put you in that triangle, and then I'm going to take my hands off and let you do what you do. I'm going to let you do what we hired you to do. Right. So you set them up and then you let them go. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is with that, there comes the coaching, there comes the constant reset and realign. Don't look at resetting and realigning as micromanaging. That's the difference between micromanaging and leading. Micromanaging is you're taking their hand and you're doing most of the work while they watch. That's a lot of what micromanaging is, right? But setting them up and realigning to that process over and over again, that's what good leadership does. And lastly, the third thing I would say here is understand that in order to get people to get it, right? Like that's why so many people micromanage is they just don't get it, right? They don't get it because I don't think you're leading them well enough by asking leading questions. Ask leading questions. You know the answer already. So don't give them the answer. Ask the question. And if they answer the question in the wrong way, just continue asking questions and lead them to the right answer. Lead them to the right answer. Like get them to understand, like, because if you just hand it to them and say, here's the right answer, they go, I guess. And there's no roots there. And we kind of got into it a little bit earlier, thinking about a garden analogy. Like a plant can't grow if you're constantly checking its roots.
Yeah.
You know, good point. So, but to understand, like, if I can get them to understand and give them understanding, then the action will take care of itself.
That's right.
And micromanagers are so focused on the action, and good leaders are focused on good understanding.
Well, can I get real therapy for a second?
Oh, I love therapy. Okay. Doing it today.
So first, inspired teams are not managed. They're inspired. You cannot manage an inspired team. The thing I would say to the person who is trying to manage a team by micromanagement is I think there is a deep-rooted fear that if I'm not perfect, then I'm not good enough. And fear there in micromanagement is Well, I'm training this person. I'm showing this person. I'm leading this person. And if they're not perfect, that's a reflection on me. And therefore, I'm just going to do it for them. And then I'm just going to complain how I'm the only one, but my team still gets it done.
Right.
That's just hubris. Like, it's arrogance. Like, there is a part of this that I think that we've got to deal with some of the wounds in our life to understand that perfection is a myth and it is foolish. And if you are trying to create a perfect environment, by the way, if you're trying to create a perfect environment, you are the cesspool for micromanagement. Okay. That's it.
I love it.
That's what you're trying to do. Let me let you know that there is bacteria everywhere. This micromanagement, and you don't want that. Okay. So I think sometimes some of this is you just got to let go of these wounds, and easier preached than lived. I get that. Right. But the only way to let go of it is to let failure in and to mess some stuff up and to allow people to learn as well. Because if you just do it for them, they never learn. And so you're just creating a managed team instead of an inspired team.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I want to get into something that we mentioned in the problem was clear expectations. And we talk about a lot on this podcast about how leaders think that they've communicated something because they're thinking about it all the time, but it never actually made it out of their mouth. And so they start a conversation with no context, and the person listening to them or the person that they're leading is going, I have no idea what you're talking about. Sure you do. We've talked about this many times. No, you've talked to yourself about it many times.
Yeah.
But we've never talked about it. Right. So setting clear expectations, my number one rule on setting clear expectations is it has to be written down. I don't care if it's on a whiteboard. I don't care if it's on the palm of your hand. It has to be written down. And the reason why is when you write it down, both of you can observe the language for exactly what it says. And there's no misinterpretation, or there's very little misinterpretation possible when it's written in black and white or blue and white or whatever color marker you use. Doesn't matter. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can see for yourself, this is the thing that we're expecting. Do you see that? That's what I expect. I see what you expect. I'm hearing this. It's the whole repeat back to yourself, or repeat back to me what I told you so I can make sure you understand. Yes. Yep. It's that whole concept. And it seems so simple, and it almost seems too simple. And I think that's why leaders don't do it.
Yeah.
But writing things down has been psychologically proven to stick longer in people's brain. Number one, the physical act of writing maps out as your hand is moving, even more than typing. Sure, type it up. That's fine. But at some point, you and the person that you're leading need to physically write it down. It's why when I lead people, it's mandatory that you have some type of physical note-taking device. You can use AI. I use it. That's great. You can use Google Docs. I use it. That's great. But at some point, I want to see a pen to paper or a pen to Remarkable or pen to iPad, and I want to see that pen moving, because then I know you're listening. It's active listening in that moment. So clear expectations, I think, begin with having the thing written out. I'm going to say it. I'm going to write it. You're going to read it. That's 3 different ways in that moment that it's going to stick for you. And if everybody is in the same room and everybody's on the same page, then those expectations are super clear. And I'm telling you, you know this as a leader, you know this as someone who follows a leader. It's super frustrating when you don't have those clear expectations, but it's super simple to overcome it. It's write it down, it's read it out loud, and it's taking those notes actively every single time.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if we're doing action steps right now. In my mind, I feel like we are talking about this as a solution part here. But when I think about this, the best cultures reward that which should be rewarded, and deal with the weeds the way they need to deal with the weeds, right? If you walk in and you say, man, there are weeds everywhere, and you just start spraying Roundup absolutely everywhere and grass and weed killer, you're going to kill all the good stuff too, right? Like, you're going to cause mayhem among all the good stuff.
There's going to be unintended casualties.
Absolutely. And there's that, there's some parable in the Bible where it talked about, like, hey, who put all these weeds in this garden? And do you want us to tear all the weeds out? And the response was no, because you might get the wheat too. And why don't we just deal with it at the harvest, and we'll deal with that at that point. But I think the thing we got to understand is sometimes the problem is we're not rewarding the good stuff. We're not showing people what the good stuff is. I remember one time, and this really curved the way I thought early in business development. And one of our team members, I was coaching them, and they said something unfortunately profound. They said, you know, it sounds weird, but I really like when I'm not getting talked to. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, I just learned that I must be doing a good job if nobody's saying things to me, because usually when you're getting talked to, it's on the other side. And I was like, that sucks.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
And I was like, okay, then we're not celebrating the good stuff.
Yeah.
We're finding that it's more about me dealing with the bad stuff than it is about helping them see, gosh, that's rewardable. Way to go. And so you want to reward, not necessarily monetarily, not necessarily with a big gold sticker or whatever, but with good words of, dang, you really killed that. You did awesome here. That's how you celebrate accountability. Okay. Accountability is not, I didn't get talked to about bad stuff. It's, I got celebrated for good stuff. Okay. Because otherwise people are going to get innovative to not let your bad stuff show. They're going to start turning to, how do I do the good stuff? So end of the day, we don't want to just highlight the things they're doing incorrectly to where they will start actionably using their innovation for misconduct. We want to celebrate the good stuff. We don't want them to think, oh, it's so great. Nobody said anything to me. I must be doing good. We want them to clearly know, as A players, they're doing good. Okay, so we need to celebrate the accountability aspect. Hey, you had this goal, and this goal, and you knocked 95% of that off. Way to go. Like, thanks for staying on it. Thanks for doing your due diligence. Sure, we'll work on that other 5%, but this is great. Way to be. Instead of radio silence when someone's doing good, and then they only hear your voice when things are going wrong. Okay. You know, as being parented or parenting, you know that that's just not the good stuff, right? You don't always want to be that voice. You want to be the voice that says, I care about you and I'm proud of you.
I love it. Let's close out with some action steps here. I think when this is all said and done, Blake, it's really the leaders that need to take the biggest action here and lead by example and model. We've been talking about modeling a lot in our house these days. And I think this is an opportunity for leaders to do that. And I think the first thing you have to do as leaders is you have to audit your current management style. Are you coaching or are you controlling? Honestly, ask that. And honestly, ask for feedback on it. The ones that you're leading will give you the answers, because those they're sitting under that direction, right? Number two, I want you to define some clear outcomes and some success metrics for each team member. That's what we talked about earlier, about having those clear expectations. Write them down, read them out loud, discuss them ad nauseum. And then thirdly, I want you to make sure you're creating, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever it is, some kind of regular check-in with your team members, one-on-one, that's focused on support, not surveillance. Yeah. Support, not how can I support you, not here's what I've been surveilling. Right? Those are two different meetings. So let's focus on some support tactics there. That's going to wrap up. We have a long episode already because we missed y'all. And we had lots to talk about and bring you up to speed on and all those sorts of things. But next episode, we're going to be back talking about effective onboarding strategies that reinforce your company culture. Cannot wait to talk with you about that next time on the Culture Base Podcast. Have a great week.